Mark Geragos doing the job for me tonight, right here on the TV. He's a criminal defense attorney. He's the co-host of Reasonable Doubt, the podcast with Adam Carolla, and he's also a friend of mine. Okay, so here's what I want to ask you, Geragos. The whole idea of why Alec Murdaugh said he lied to the police when they asked him if he'd been there at the time Paul and Maggie were killed, in and around the time. And he said, no, gosh, no, I was napping and then off at my mom's. He maintained that over the last year and a half, right? He maintained that story over and over and over. And today on the stand, he copped to it because there's an audio tape that's pretty irrefutable with his voice on it. And the reason he gave was that he was paranoid around law enforcement because of his opioid addiction. But I'm struggling with that. I think most people might be. But he's the guy who literally lives among law enforcement, has a badge of his own that he can bring out and wear on his hip. It just didn't seem to land well with me, the reason that he lied. What about you?
Well, I don't know where else he could have gone. I have been saying for a while that I thought he would take the stand, and I'll tell you why, because you talked previously in the show about it. But he's facing, I don't know that people do or don't know this. In South Carolina, when you have that special enhancement for a breach of your duty, he's facing basically the rest of his life in prison on just the financial crimes. And if you've been paying attention to this trial, even a casual observer would say this is pretty compelling evidence that he's taken the advantage of his clients. So he was going to get, or it was likely he was going to get convicted of that, and he was going to do the rest of his life in prison. Did he then have anything to lose here by taking the stand? My argument would be no, he doesn't have anything to lose, everything to gain by not being a convicted murderer. And then, aside from that strategic calculation, he was able to explain, I think, in a compelling way, and the only caveat I'll put to that is, I've been there when a client has taken the stand, like Harpootlian, maybe over my advice, and they look good on direct and they look okay on day one of the cross. And then you wait and you see, and I've been there on a Friday when they start to wear down, and then the prosecutor gets the idea, maybe I'm going to run out the clock and come back and I'll have the whole weekend to cross-examine him on Monday, and then the client doesn't look so good. So, it's a very, very tough thing, and yeah.
It is. But you know what, Geragos? The weird thing in this courtroom is that these jurors are not allowed to take notes. So some of the stuff they've heard early in the case is like ancient history, and if they're like me, it's gonzo. I can't keep anything in my mind more than like a couple days. And so one of the theories I kind of believe in this case is that whatever the last word that's spoken is going to be the most powerful word, even more so. I know in most cases it is, but even more so in this case because they don't have notes. They just have whatever they can remember. And don't you think that this guy weeping about his family on the stand is going to leave the most impactful impression on this jury?
Well, it's a very interesting observation because my experience is that when you can take notes, that the least emotional people tend to take notes, and that those who are most kind of have the highest level of emotional intelligence tend to not take as detailed a notes. So that is an interesting observation, and I can see that, and especially in a long trial where, and by the way, as my father used to say, he was an old homicide prosecutor, he used to say, it doesn't matter what happened once the defendant takes the stand. All the jurors want to talk about once the defendant takes the stand is what did he say and did we believe him? That becomes the focus of the case. Everything that happens before that, out the window anyway.
So let me ask you this part, because I can't do math very well, but the rudimentary math that I can do suggests that all the financial crimes he's facing, and they are in the dozens, would amount to dozens of years behind prison if they could convict him on it. And today, he literally convicted himself over and over and over under oath on the stand. So I'm trying to figure out what's worse, being put away for the rest of his life for the murder of his wife and son, or being put away for, 40, 50, 60 years, which is the rest of his life for the financial crimes. I'm not really sure I understand what he was gaining by saying all those things on the stand.
if this were, and I'm no expert in sentencing in that jurisdiction, but I'll tell you, in a lot of other jurisdictions, you're going to do easier time because of the financial crimes than you would because of a violent crime, and you get credits and things of that nature. And if he's acquitted or not convicted of the murder case, who knows what could happen later on when it's the financial crimes. And by the way, if you didn't do it, let's go back to that. If you're innocent of these crimes, then there's a lot of jurors who, even though they're instructed otherwise, say, if it were me and I was innocent, I've heard this so many times in voir dire, you couldn't keep me off that stand. And even though the law is different than that, human nature tends to be a pretty strong force.
It's why closing arguments are so important. Mark Geragos, thank you. Always love talking to you.
Thank you, Ashleigh. Good seeing you.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.